Sheriff Chris Nanos, I know you're giving us limited time, and I appreciate it, with this investigation so fluid. But I want to go back a little bit early on. You said your gut told you that Nancy was taken from her home and that she is still alive at that time. What does your gut tell you now about the entry to the home? And was there forced entry? Or did she know the person that took her? What do you think now?
Okay, so I'm not going to get into the entry of the home or forced entry or any of that. What I'll tell you is I believe, just as I had initially, that Nancy was removed from that home against her will. She was kidnapped, and we still believe that.
How do you piece together the 40 minutes inside that home, after the doorbell camera disconnected? I mean, really, no idea still?
There's all kinds of thinking on that and theories. And to be honest, you don't want the sheriff's theories. Yeah. You want the investigators, because they're the ones who actually physically know the evidence, what they've collected, gathered, that crime scene. They were there. They're doing all the interviews. I have a team of young men and women who do this every day. I hear the pundits that, the crime scene should have been done, should have been held longer. Look, this team of mine has done this type of investigation, homicides, for example, for decades. They have one of the highest solvency clearance rates in the country. Sometimes they get that case that you think will never be solved done in a day. They're very good. They're very well trained. They know what they're doing. I don't go and tell them, okay, we've been here long enough, let's go home. They spent over 20 hours at that scene processing it. They, along with forensic techs who are trained, process these things. Then they decide that they're done. They came here with all of their evidence. Some of the evidence we gave to the FBI. Why did we do that? Well, because we know the FBI is good with certain pieces of evidence, that they have the technological skills to deal with things like cameras and phones and different things. And we handed that to them. Ransom notes, gave them to the FBI. We use a lab that we've used again for decades for DNA. We submitted all of our biological.
The night of January 31st, 2026 began like any other quiet evening in the peaceful desert community of the Catalina foothills near Tucson. The neighborhood was known for its calm streets, warm sunsets, and the kind of silence that only the Arizona desert could offer after dark. For 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, it was supposed to be just another normal night at home. Nancy had spent the evening with family, sharing dinner and conversation the way she often did. She was known as a strong and independent woman who had spent decades building a life in the community. Many people also knew her as the mother of television journalist Savannah Guthrie, but to those close to her, she was simply Nancy, a devoted mother, grandmother, and neighbor who still enjoyed living independently despite her age. Late that evening, Nancy was dropped off at her home. Nothing about the moment seemed unusual. The house lights glowed softly against the desert darkness as she walked inside, likely expecting to settle into a quiet night. Outside, the wind moved gently through the desert plants and the neighborhood remained still. But sometime during the early hours of the morning, something changed. The next day, Nancy was expected to attend a virtual church service and respond to a few routine messages from family. When she didn't answer calls or texts, concern began to grow. At first it seemed like it could be something simple, maybe she had overslept or stepped out briefly. But as the hours passed, the worry turned into fear. Family members eventually went to check on her house. What they found inside immediately told them something was terribly wrong. Nancy wasn't there. Personal belongings that she would normally take with her were still inside the home, and parts of the house appeared disturbed. Authorities were contacted, and soon deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at the scene. What began as a welfare check quickly turned into something much more serious. After a closer look at the evidence inside the home, investigators believed Nancy had not simply wandered off. The signs suggested she may have been taken against her will. The quiet desert neighborhood suddenly became the center of a growing mystery. Police vehicles lined the street, crime scene tapes surrounded the property, and investigators began documenting every detail that might explain what had happened during the night. For the family, the realization was devastating. Somewhere between the moment Nancy walked through her front door and the following morning, she had disappeared. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything unusual. Yet an 84-year-old woman had seemingly vanished from her own home. As the investigation began to unfold, one question echoed through the community. How could someone disappear without a trace in such a quiet place? And as you continue listening to this case, take a moment to support the channel. If you enjoy real investigative stories like this one, consider liking the video, subscribing to Real Case Records, and sharing this story so more people can learn about cases that still need answers. Because what investigators were about to discover next
A
would make the
new clue
mystery
in the
even
search for Savannah Guthrie's mother. A Ring camera a few miles away from Nancy Guthrie's home capturing a man acting suspiciously at 3 and 5 a.m. a week before Guthrie was taken. He does have facial hair, and apparently so does the man captured on Nancy Guthrie's camera. Jim Murray is in Tucson with the latest.
It's chilling new video of a night prowler at a house 6 miles from the home of kidnap victim Nancy Guthrie. Detectives investigating Nancy's abduction are reportedly looking into the video to determine if there's a connection. The video was posted by the homeowner on January 23rd on Ring Neighbors, a community app, 8 days before Savannah Guthrie's mom was taken. The homeowner, who declined to be identified, posted, "My dogs went crazy and thankfully spooked him away. He came to the door at 3 a.m. and again at 5 a.m. He turned away from the camera and clearly did not want his face to be seen as he rang the bell. He has a mustache and goatee."
Detectives began asking urgent questions. Who would target an elderly woman living alone in such a quiet neighborhood? And how had they managed to enter and leave without anyone nearby noticing? The search for answers soon led investigators to something critical: surveillance footage from Nancy's own doorbell camera. When detectives reviewed the recording, they noticed a shadowy figure approaching the house in the early hours of the morning. The person appeared to be wearing gloves, a face covering, and a backpack. The individual moved carefully, as if they knew exactly where they were going. What made the footage even more disturbing was what happened next. The person appeared to reach toward the doorbell camera, possibly attempting to disable it. Within moments, the recording stopped. That brief clip raised more questions than answers. Was the suspect someone who had studied the house beforehand? Had they been watching Nancy's routine? Or had this crime been planned long before that night? Investigators began canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors and asking residents if they had seen anything unusual. Some neighbors reported noticing a vehicle moving slowly through the area late that night, but no one could provide a clear description. Meanwhile, the disappearance was beginning to gain national attention, especially because Nancy was the mother of television journalist Savannah Guthrie. News outlets across the country started reporting on the mysterious case, bringing even more pressure on investigators to find answers quickly. As the hours turned into days, one thing became clear to detectives: this was not a random disappearance. Someone had come to Nancy's home in the middle of the night, and whatever happened inside had left behind only a few troubling clues. And before we continue deeper into this investigation, take a moment to join the conversation. What do you think happened that night? Was this a planned abduction or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're following the case with us, remember to like the video, subscribe to Real Case Records, and share it so more people can help keep attention on cases that still need answers. Because as investigators expanded the search beyond the neighborhood, the mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie was only just beginning to unfold. As news of the disappearance spread, the search for Nancy Guthrie quickly expanded far beyond her quiet neighborhood in the Catalina foothills near Tucson. What had begun as a local investigation soon turned into one of the most extensive search efforts the region had seen in years. Authorities knew that every hour mattered, especially considering Nancy's age and the medications she relied on daily. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department coordinated with multiple agencies to cover as much ground as possible. Search teams moved through the rugged desert terrain surrounding the city, carefully scanning dry riverbeds, hiking trails, and remote roads that stretched for miles beyond the neighborhood. Helicopters circled overhead, while drones equipped with thermal cameras searched for any sign of movement or evidence.
Moments ago, President Trump weighing in on the Nancy Guthrie case, telling the New York Post he will instruct the Department of Justice to seek the death penalty on the potential captors if the 84-year-old grandmother is not returned safe and sound to her family. President Trump went on to tell the Post they will face, quote, the most severe federal consequences if Nancy is found dead. Which we are a long way from that point, Paul. So just sort of picking up where we left off, a lot of digital threads to pull, and do you think that ultimately it will be digital evidence that will help break the case, or do you believe it will be genetic evidence that will do so?
Ooh,
or both?
Tough call. I mean, you know, one digital vector in this thing that we hadn't explored was if the purchase history that Walmart has, and the various Walmart stores have different metrics for how long they retain the video. So let's say it's outside the range of where they retain the video. Their video is going to be very much like the video that she had at her house, right, which is it's not actual video, it's code. So my point is you may have to do something similar with the, let's say they identify the purchase, but it's 3 months ago, but they only have 2 months worth of video recorded. You might have to do something like they did with Google, which is go in, see if you can retrieve enough of that code to build an image so we can get a look at this person. So that would be very key. And then the other thing, of course, is that with Donald Trump talking, you have to wonder if the case is about to go completely federal. I'm wondering what the jurisdiction would be.
Yeah. Donna, you broke the news that Harvey Levin claims he has a fourth email with someone who claims that he saw Nancy Guthrie south of the border. So a lot of information to sift through.
But he's still asking, like, I want to make sure that you're really involved and you're not making this up.
Right.
Look, Savannah Guthrie went on TV or on her Instagram yesterday, and she is holding out hope. She said, it's not too late to basically give me back my mother and whatever the situation. I don't know how it ends from there. I think it's kind of interesting. They're flying planes in that area, looking for some kind of signals from pacemakers. Now, I think we've had doctors on who've basically said the pacemaker can work without the base. So she could be okay, right, Paul?
Yeah, it does work without it, yeah.
Okay, so, but I guess they can get a ping from a pacemaker?
It's hard, and it's very, very low energy. You got to know what you're looking for. Each pacemaker has an individual footprint. That's what they're looking for, the fingerprint of the pacemaker, but it's a very low energy thing, and that's why they're playing in all of this.
Why didn't they do that sooner?
Investigators began focusing more closely on the possibility that the crime had been carefully planned. The masked individual captured on Nancy's doorbell camera did not appear to be wandering randomly. Their movements seemed deliberate, almost as if they already knew the layout of the property. Detectives started examining whether the suspect might have researched Nancy beforehand or studied her daily routine. Because Nancy was the mother of well-known journalist Savannah Guthrie, investigators also explored the possibility that the suspect may have targeted the family hopping to gain attention or financial leverage. Rumors began circulating about messages sent to media outlets demanding money in cryptocurrency in exchange for information about Nancy's whereabouts. Authorities, however, warned that many of those messages could be hoaxes created by people trying to exploit the situation. At the same time, the case began drawing criticism and scrutiny. The investigation was being led by the Pima County Sheriff's Department under the leadership of Sheriff Chris Nano. As the search continued without a breakthrough, some media outlets and members of the public began questioning whether the investigation had moved quickly enough during the crucial early hours after Nancy disappeared. Additional reports surfaced examining Sheriff Nano's professional background, which added further controversy to the already high-profile case. Although the sheriff publicly defended the department's work and insisted that investigators were following every possible lead, The growing criticism created additional pressure on the team trying to solve the mystery. Meanwhile, detectives continued reviewing digital evidence, financial records, and surveillance footage from nearby streets. Every passing day increased the urgency of the investigation. The longer Nancy remained missing, the more difficult it became to determine what had truly happened that night. The case had now become a national mystery. News outlets, investigators, and online communities were all searching for the same answers. Who was the masked person seen approaching the house? Why was Nancy targeted? And where had she been taken? If you've been following this case so far, this is a good moment to pause and support the channel. Stories like this take time to research and share. So if you're interested in real investigations and unsolved mysteries, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Real Case Records, and share it with others who follow true crime. Because as investigators continued digging deeper into the evidence, the most haunting questions about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance were still waiting to be answered. As the investigation stretched on, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie remained one of the most troubling mysteries connected to the quiet desert city of Tucson. Weeks had passed since the night she walked into her home and seemingly vanished without a trace. Despite extensive searches, countless interviews, and the involvement of multiple investigative teams, no confirmed evidence had surfaced to explain exactly where Nancy had been taken or who was responsible. Investigators continued to analyze every piece of information they had gathered. Forensic specialists reviewed DNA samples collected from the home, while detectives carefully examined surveillance footage from nearby streets and businesses. The brief clip of the masked individual captured by the doorbell camera remained one of the most important clues in the case. Yet even after being studied frame by frame, the identity of that person remained unknown. Authorities from the Pima County Sheriff's Department continued to urge the public to come forward with any information, no matter how small it might seem. They emphasized that cases like this are sometimes solved months or even years later when someone remembers a detail that once seemed insignificant. For the family, the uncertainty was the hardest part. Television journalist Savannah Guthrie and her relatives continued to hold on to hope that answers would eventually come. Public appeals, interviews, and messages asking for help kept the story in the national spotlight, reminding people across the country that Nancy was more than just a headline. She was a mother, a grandmother, and a member of a community that still wanted her safely returned. Meanwhile, the mystery surrounding that night continued to haunt investigators. Why would someone target an elderly woman living alone in such a peaceful neighborhood? Was the suspect someone who had been watching the house for days, weeks, or even months? Or was there a connection that investigators had not yet uncovered? These unanswered questions are what keep cases like this alive in the minds of both investigators and the public. Every detail still matters. Every memory could lead to the one piece of evidence that finally reveals the truth. And that's why sharing stories like this is so important. If you've followed this case with us from the beginning, take a moment to support Real Case Records by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this story so more people can hear about it. Public awareness can sometimes be the key that brings new information forward. Because somewhere out there, someone may know what really happened the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. And until the truth is uncovered, the search for answers continues.